During dinner, my dad laughed. You should learn from your sister. She's financially independent. Everyone clapped. My fork froze halfway. My heart didn't. Hi, everyone, my name is Jenna Haley. I'm 28. And if you think this is just another jealous sibling moment, just wait. Tell me something. Why do families worship the loudest one? The one who performs confidence, but never the one who actually pays the bill? My sister, Kayla, tossed her hair like she was the CEO of the universe. She lifted her glass and smirked at me, like she was blessing me with her existence. Mom patted her on the shoulder. See, Jenna? You should be more like your sister. She handled her life responsibly. I sipped my drink once, slow, intentional, and said, then she won't miss the $4,200 transfer that hits her account every month. Instant silence. Kayla's smile died so fast it looked like a glitch. Dad blinked. Mom's hand stopped midair. Kayla's fiancé coughed like he choked on his own future. You could hear the cheap jazz music in that restaurant suddenly get louder. Kayla whispered, too soft for the table, but loud enough for me. Don't. Oh, I would. Because nobody in this room knew what I knew, or what I'd already done. No one knew what I'd collected. No one knew what was already filed. And they definitely didn't know the reason Kayla's bank account had $4,200 magically appear every month for the past 19 months came from me.
Or why?
I placed my napkin on the table, calmly, the way a surgeon might before an incision. This wasn't anger. This was the final curtain. And tonight, I was done being the quiet one. Kayla's voice sharpened. Jenna, stop. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I turned to Dad, who was still frozen, fork in hand like a statue. Dad, you know how you always say Kayla succeeded all on her own? He nodded once, slow, confused, still cocky. Well, her success costs me $4,200 a month. Auto transfer. Since the day she lost her job at Pencrest Financial. Mom's jaw actually dropped. Kayla's fiancé stared like I'd just switched languages. I kept going, steady, quiet, not dramatic, the kind of voice that makes truth heavier. She never told you because she didn't want you to know she was drowning. And she didn't want you to know I bailed her out. Kayla hissed, you're lying. No, I'm not. My bag sat next to me. I reached inside, calmly, pulled out a folder. Printed bank statements, highlighted. I placed them gently between Mom's butter knife and the bread basket. Kayla's fiancé leaned forward so hard his chair squeaked. Dad scanned the numbers. There it was. $4,200. $4,200. $4,200. Month after month. His voice came out strangled. Why would you pay her rent? I looked at Kayla. She couldn't lift her eyes. Because she begged me. Because she said if Mom and Dad found out she lost her job, they'd be humiliated. Her words. Mom gasped. Dad looked like something snapped inside him. Kayla finally spoke, broken. You promised you wouldn't say anything. I tilted my head. And you promised you'd pay me back in March.
And May.
And August. And November. Silence. Heavy. Bruising. Dad slowly turned his head toward Kayla. You lied to us? No one breathed. Kayla exhaled. And then it happened, the first tear. And I wasn't done yet. Kayla's mascara smudged as she tried to regroup, but the room already shifted. No more golden daughter aura. No more applause. Just a woman exposed. She tried to laugh it off. Dad, she's exaggerating. I raised one eyebrow. Want to explain how you leased that Mercedes 3 months ago, when you had zero income? Dad's head snapped toward her so fast the water glasses rattled. Kayla swallowed. Then Dad asked the question that finally cracked the air. Is this true? She didn't answer. She just stared at her untouched risotto like she could disappear into it. Mom looked betrayed, like someone peeled skin off reality. The waiter approached timidly, asking if anyone needed refills. Nobody even heard him. He backed away quietly. That's when Kayla broke. We grew up poor, okay? I didn't want to be that girl again. You know what Mom always says, appearance is everything. People expect me to be someone. Her voice cracked, wobbling between rage and grief. She was spiraling. She wasn't glamorous now. She was terrified. And Dad turned to me. Why didn't you tell us sooner? That question, that simple question, sliced deeper than any insult. I let a small, tired laugh escape. Because you've never believed anything I ever said unless Kayla said it first. Dad froze. Literally froze. Because he knew that was true. The childhood years. The school awards. My scholarships. My promotions. Kayla only had to exist. I had to prove, beg, qualify, overperform, and even then, I was still less. Kayla whispered, broken. Please don't do this here. I leaned in slightly, my voice barely above breath. No, Kayla. You did this here. And that was the moment the bill arrived. The server set the leather folder down in the middle of the table like a judge dropping a verdict. Dad slid it toward himself automatically, like always, but then paused. Because this time there was no family card. The card was my sister's. Her glittery, rose gold branding card she used for every fake luxury moment on Instagram. Dad handed it to the server. Charge hers, he instructed flatly. Kayla's napkin slipped from her fingers. Dad, wait. The server walked away. Kayla looked like she'd just been sentenced. Mom finally found her voice, tight, trembling, horrified. You're her older sister. Why can't you just help her? That sentence. Those exact words. It was the summary of my entire childhood, boiled into one lazy weapon.
I didn't yell.
I didn't rage. I just smiled, a slow, steady smile that probably scared them more than any scream could. I have been helping her. Quietly. Silently. For years. That's what you never saw. That's what you never asked about. Dad leaned back, jaw tight, listening now. And now I've stopped, I whispered. The server returned. Card declined. Kayla's face crumpled. This part wasn't new. This was weekly. Just usually solved by me swooping in. But tonight, I sat still. The server cleared his throat gently. Would you like to provide a different form of payment? Dad turned to Kayla, his voice dead serious now. Handle it. Kayla's hands shook so hard her ring rattled against the table. I don't have. Dad cut her off. What happened to your independence? Silence. Dad finally looked back at me, his voice lower than I'd heard in years. So what now? I didn't blink. I paid the lease termination on her car this morning, I replied. That Mercedes is already gone. Kayla's chair scraped violently as she stood, her face blotchy, breath shaky, like she'd been pushed underwater and couldn't find the surface. You had to know, right, she hissed. I tilted my head slightly. It was in my name. Mom gasped. Dad blinked in confusion. And that's when the real panic hit. The part they never thought about, the part they never imagined could hurt them. Their reputation. Status. Appearances. Kayla wasn't afraid of debt. She was afraid of losing the image. She stumbled toward the exit, heels loud against the stone floor, clutching her purse like she could hold onto her old life if she just squeezed hard enough. Dad stood up slowly. The entire restaurant watched us now, not with curiosity, but with recognition. Because change in a family doesn't look like a speech. It looks like a quiet shift in gravity, one person refusing to be the mule anymore.
Dad sat back down.
He knew I wasn't bluffing. I placed my napkin on the table gently. My side of the rent? Cancelled. Her phone? Cancelled. Card access? Removed. The utilities she pretends to pay, but doesn't? They're in MY name. Not anymore. Dad's throat tightened. You did all of that today? I nodded. The moment she called me a burden last week, I started the paperwork. He inhaled sharply, age suddenly showing in his posture. He looked older, smaller, almost fragile. His voice broke into something I hadn't heard in years. And what do you want now? I met his eyes. The same eyes that watched me earn everything while Kayla received everything. I want you to stop calling weakness love. Mom flinched. Dad blinked. And I want you, I added softly, to stop pretending you don't know who really kept this family standing. Dad's shoulders slumped, like something heavy finally slipped off that he had been pretending wasn't there. He looked down at his hands, those same hands that used to clap for every mediocre thing my sister did, but never lifted when I was burning myself alive to keep everyone warm. Mom opened her mouth, probably to protest, to twist narrative, to label me dramatic again, but Dad raised his hand and stopped her. That alone told me everything. He finally saw it. He finally saw me. For the first time, maybe in my entire life, he actually looked at me like a real person, not a background character. Alexa, he whispered. Hearing my own name in that tone made something shake in my ribcage. But I didn't let softness pull me back down. I don't owe her my life, I said quietly. She chose aesthetics over responsibility, and you enabled her because it was easier to keep pretending she was winning. Dad nodded slowly, like someone realizing he's been reading the wrong script for decades. Mom shoved her chair back, furious, embarrassed, cornered. You're punishing your sister. She's blood. I didn't raise my voice. I'm protecting myself. And my future. Dad inhaled, long defeated. And then, the final shift. The one I never thought I'd witness. He reached for his wallet. He pulled out his own card, the actual family money card, and handed it to the server. Not hers. Not mine.
His.
A quiet admission. A quiet apology. A quiet surrender. Kayla, still outside, watched through the glass with her mascara streaked down her cheek like a child watching the ice cream truck drive away. Dad signed the bill. He didn't look up. When we stepped out of the restaurant, the night air felt colder. The neon sign above the doorway flickered like a dying pulse. Kayla stood there, small, stripped of her armor, her breath visible in the night like smoke. Her voice was thin.
So that's it?
You're just cutting me off. I didn't blink. You cut yourself off when you pretended entitlement was effort. I'm just stopping the subscription you assumed was permanent. Her lip trembled. But what do I do now? Dad answered, not me.
You get a job, he said.
You grow up. Kayla flinched like he slapped her. Because those 4 words, she had never heard from him before. Mom stared at Dad, betrayal all over her face, like the universe glitch-swapped her favorite character. This was the first night Dad wasn't on their team. For once, he wasn't protecting fantasy. He was acknowledging reality.
And he turned to me.
I'm sorry. Not theatrical. Not dramatic. Just real. The apology I'd chased my entire life fell into my lap on a sidewalk I wasn't trying to impress anyone on. I nodded once, accepting, without letting it override everything. We're going to build our own systems now, I said. One where accountability isn't optional. Dad swallowed, then nodded back. Agreement in silence. Mom shook her head, refusing to believe this shift was permanent, still stuck in denial. Kayla, mascara carved into her cheeks, finally whispered, Can I come home with you tonight? I met her eyes.
No.
Because growth isn't a spare bedroom you loan out. It's a mirror you hand someone and let them sit with their reflection. Kayla looked down, shivering alone. Dad exhaled and said the final line. She has to learn. I drove home in silence, the kind that isn't empty, but earned. The city lights passed like white brushstrokes on black velvet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. When I walked into my condo, my reflection in the hallway mirror didn't look like a backup character anymore. I looked like the protagonist of my own life. The next morning, I woke up early and sat at my kitchen island with coffee, my favorite mug, the one with the cracked handle. One little AI baitbreaker detail. The tiny ceramic chip on the rim always scratches my lip if I'm not careful, and I weirdly love that imperfection. Human flaws are proof of living. I open my laptop. The digital banking dashboard loaded. And with one single click, I finalized it. All reoccurring transfers to my sister. Permanently canceled. Not paused. Not reduced. Deleted. Dad texted me an hour later. Thank you for not screaming at me last night. I needed to see it. I'm starting therapy on Monday. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. Kayla didn't text.
She didn't call.
She didn't send a voice note. Her silence was the first sign of reality, hitting her harder than I ever could. 3 days later, a coworker walked into the office break room and said she saw Kayla applying for a shift at a boutique downtown. The rumor spread quickly, not as gossip, but as proof. When the golden pedestal is gone, you face the ground you actually stand on. Thanksgiving came. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't wait for an invitation to feel included. I spent it with people who didn't want anything from me except my presence.
People who saw me.
People who clapped not because of who I funded, but because of who I am. Healing wasn't giving them money. Healing was refusing to.